Hello and welcome back to the Tigers Down Under. We have been away for quite a while and a lot has happened on field, which we're eager to get in and discuss. But first, I'll welcome my guest for the evening. Welcome, Dan.
Hey Alex, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a little while. We were talking off air just before the podcast started that the last episode that we had, we previewed the game against Birmingham City, where the context of the discussion was basically we would be lucky to get a point against them, and we were hoping, a result would be great, but a point would be certainly more than adequate. We were sitting 23rd in the table on 15 points from 16 games played. Fast forward to today, we've played a further 11 games, or 12 games, I should say. 11 games. And we're on 39 points. So between episodes, we've amassed 24 points from 11 games, so 24 from a possible 33, which is utterly outstanding and utterly ridiculous. So obviously there's a lot of games that we could discuss, and I think we kind of decided it would be better to go through the players and highlight the players' performances that have helped turn around this form. But as a general thought, general comment, what's been your sense or what's been your take on this amazing form?
Yeah, it's just been wild. I honestly, like, heading into the season, I would never have thought there would have come a point this year where we would have amassed six wins in a row in the league. It's insane, and to think that, like, it hasn't all been. It's not like we've got our results all against the bottom six. Like,
West
we've
Brom, Leeds.
Yeah, there's been some very impressive results in there, and some really impressive performances. And I think it's just been, like, I think we were saying in our last episode that our position maybe was not completely reflective of our performances overall. It maybe looked a little bit worse than how the team was performing as a whole, because I think across the first 10 or 15 games, we had only lost a game. We'd only conceded more than one goal in about four of the games or something. So there was lots of 1-0 losses and 1-1 draws and things, but they've just sort of clicked into gear and turned the corner now a little bit. So it's been onwards and upwards, and long may it continue.
Well, it's great to see, because I think we were saying similar last season as well, especially under Slutsky at the start of the season, where so many late goals, so many drop points, whether it was turning a win into a draw or a draw into a loss, where we could look at the team and say this squad should be performing a whole lot better, because obviously the games were showing that we weren't getting blown away in games. We had the occasional smashing. I'm sure Derby did us last season just as they did us in the Cup this season. But on the whole, we were actually playing quite well. And so for the position in the table that we were in, same as this season, it seemed quite unjust. And so it's great to see this season that we've actually clicked into gear. And I think the most remarkable thing, and always the thing that I have to say when people ask, where has this form come from? Has someone just returned from an injury and sort of slotted back into the side? So like last season when Hernandez came back into the side, you could kind of look at that and say, well, that's where that form's come from, or, signing Wilson in January, things like that. But this season, there's not been any particular player necessarily who's slotted into the side and, performed like a house on fire. It's not like we've sacked the manager and you've got a new manager bounce or anything like that. It's really just the collective performance from the group, and that confidence breeds confidence, winning breeds winning. And to go, 2-0 Brentford, 3-2 Swansea, 2-1 Preston, 2-0 Leeds, which is absolutely the best of the lot. 6-0 against Bolton, which is equally, in some ways, as impressive, to just completely blow a side off the park. And then most recently 3-0 against Wednesday, where we just absolutely cruised through the game. And as soon as they looked remotely threatening, we just went up a notch and just blew them off the park. It's fantastic to see, and there's been rotation in the personnel. We've seen Irvine score both goals in the win against Preston, and now he's off at the Asian Cup, and we thought, geez, he's going to be hard to replace. But Evandro slotted in, and he's looked equally as impressive. We've had Campbell up top scoring goals, who's then gone out of the side with an injury, and we've had Martin and Dicko and others come into the side, and even they're starting to score goals now. Bowen on one wing, Grzycki on the other, which I seem to remember in one of the early episodes we kept going on about the fact that we needed a formation that would actually suit both Bowen and Grzycki to get them into the starting 11. And I think we did sort of settle on a 4-2-3-1 as probably the best formation we could use. And so it's great to see that we've sort of stumbled on the best formation for the personnel, and it's starting to work for them.
Yeah, I think one other probably aspect which I was thinking about that has probably helped our season a little bit is there's been a few injuries, but I don't think there hasn't not really to like we haven't had a really bad run, I don't think, with
No,
injuries overall for the course of the season, which has helped because that was probably one area of concern. It probably still is depth, is real squad depth. If we had two or three players, in the next say 6 weeks go down with serious injuries, I think we would start to struggle. But hopefully that doesn't eventuate.
yeah, I mean, I can't remember which game it was. Whether it was it was Swansea or Preston or someone like that. It might have even been a little bit later. I'm not too sure. Where it was right after Elphick had been recalled by Villa and Irvine was off to the Asian Cup. So it must have been. Well, I don't know if it was actually the Leeds game. I think it was around then. Where basically it was Irvine was out of the team, Campbell was out of the team, and Elphick had been recalled. And we thought, geez, our depth's going to get tested. Not sure how the team's going to perform without Elphick, particularly in defence. But Device has come in a transformed player. As I was saying before, the strikers have really stepped up, and so has Evandro. So, even someone who at the start of the season was performing so well in Batty is not making the team anymore. So, whilst the depth's not necessarily there as much as it could be, the team still seems to be gelling really well. And without having to make wholesale changes, we are able to sort of switch players where needed. Kane at right back versus Lehigh at right back, Kingsley at left back. We've got a bit of depth to move across that defence. I think if Grzycki or Bowen were down injured, that'd be a worry. But even Milinkovic now in the Cup was looking really impressive. So we're starting to see players kind of say, oh, hang on, I want to sort of be part of this team. I want to be in this winning side. Really sort of starting to put their hand up to try and get a place in the starting 11.
Yeah, I think obviously this is obviously one of Adkins' strength is he's able to get the best out of players. Even like if you talk about Milinkovic and he was brought to the club and then they had the issues and he sort of got back into the squad for a game, but then he was late, so he was sent, and there was obviously some issues and some lack of communication sort of between those two. But the fact that obviously Adkins has obviously been able to sit down with Milinkovic and just say, look, if you just graft, you get into training, you work hard, your time will come, you will get a chance. And it's good. It is good to see him. He's only on the periphery at the moment, but that he's there, because it's disappointing always if like we bought the player, so it would be disappointing to have him just sitting in the change room collecting wages. At least he's got a potential to play some football, hopefully, even if it's only as a sub for the minute, or God forbid there's injuries or whatever. At least hopefully he's not going to get thrown in after playing 2 under-23s games in 2 months or something like.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens on that front and what sort of game time he gets. But speaking of Bowen, I think it's important to sort of touch on him first and foremost as our starman player, so to speak. With 9 goals in 8 games, he's certainly blown away any sort of speculation that he's a one-season wonder, that his form last season wasn't a fluke, and he's really started to step up a gear again this season. And some of his goals have been simply spectacular. They're not tap-ins he scored a couple of penalties, but a lot of his goals, screamers from outside the box, well-worked sort of passages of play to get past a couple of players. He's been recognised as the form player of the championship. So he's absolutely at the top of his form at the moment and looking an incredible player for us. And so I guess the most important question, despite what the club has perhaps issued in statements, is just how important is it that we keep hold of him this window and don't sort of buckle and sell him to either a rival in the division or a Premier League club?
I think if we actually, it seemed like such a distant dream at the start of the season. But with our current position, it's attainable, if not still difficult. But if we stand any chance of even pushing for a promotion spot, even like a playoff spot, Bowen has to be at the club for the remainder of the season. And that's not to say that we won't still get results without him, but to maintain as an impressive form line as we have, I think he needs to stay at the club. I think there's some things have been good. I think because there's been Tottenham was rumored to be interested and stuff, but then Pochettino came out and said no, we haven't even looked at him.
Yeah, I didn't even know his name until the question got asked.
Yeah, so there's some things that and then I think the club they blocked someone on Twitter. One of the guys who's been Jonas has been crafting a lot of rumors around Bowen. So
I thought that was quite funny.
I thought it was funny too, but I mean, whether that is whether that's just a tactical thing from the club or whether they're just saying, look, no one's approached us, and all these clubs that you're mentioning aren't actually saying anything about him. So why all these, is it just someone who's just trying to build speculation to try and make something happen or whatever? But I would be surprised if come the end of January that there hadn't been inquiries about him, but I'm hopeful that we can hold on, because I think the other thing is the Allams, as much as they've done all sorts of terrible things, and it looks highly likely that basically there's no takeover again, but they realize how much money is there if they can get to the Premier League, and so I think at this stage they're going to try and keep this together. If we don't get promoted, then the squad at the start of next season, or at the end of this season, is essentially going to be in much the same shape as it is for the takeover that has obviously just fallen through for whatever reason. So I think they're just they're playing their cards a bit close to their chest and trying to maybe, two bites at the cherry, so to speak.
Yeah.
If we can get to the Premier League, then they can sell the club for, an extra 20, 30 million or something. And if they don't, well, they're not really going to be any worse off than what they are now.
Yeah, and I think that's right, and I think especially he's got a bit of time left on his deal, so it's not as if his deal expires in the summer and they're under any pressure to sell him. Do you think, hard to say without knowing him personally, but just kind of going off what we see in either the media or on the pitch, he seems like quite a good character. Do you think if the club accepted an offer for him, Bowen might sort of refuse to leave, in a sense? If he sort of saw the potential of the promotion push, then he might say, well, actually, I'm quite settled here. I want to stay focused for the rest of the season. And obviously, unless there was a huge push from the club for him to leave, do you think he's the sort of person that would sort of agitate for a move or potentially try and make a move happen?
I don't think he is, because there's been a few players. I think Adkins was one that said, and there's some other of the managers and people that have said that basically, for a young guy like Bowen, the best thing they can be doing is playing football. He's what's he, only 22 or 23 or something?
If that, yeah.
Yeah, and being able to play, 40 games in a season is in the Championship is probably more beneficial for him than coming off the bench 5 times in the Premier League for Everton.
Yeah.
The only difference is maybe the quality of the squad and training with those, but still, there's
6 months
nothing
make a difference to that.
There's nothing like games for developing. So I think, and from what I've seen that he's just been saying in the media, he seems pretty committed to the cause, and I don't think he's one that's going to be trying to push himself out the exit door anyway.
One that might do that, but seems to have absolutely turned his form around in the last few months, is Grzycki, with 3 goals and 4 assists in the past 6 games, which is incredible form. He's one that we sort of, in a way, saw this coming at the start of the season, or at least hoped that this would come, in that he's, I think, now in the last 6 months of his deal, and we thought if he came back into the squad, he'd get his head down and really sort of try and prove himself to any potential buyers, because once the window's closed and there's no sort of chance that he's going to make a move, he's just got to get his head down and start playing. Now, there hasn't been as much talk about a potential move for him this window as there usually seems to be every other window, basically, which is interesting for 2 reasons. One, that potentially it means his agent isn't shopping him around as much, and maybe he's a bit happier here now that this is probably the best. Well, it is the best run of form that we've been on since he came to the club. but also potentially it just means that the Allams are being true to their word and they're saying we're not going to sell, and that they've basically warded off any potential interest quite quickly.
Yeah, I think also like one aspect that maybe shouldn't be discounted is that remember how his deal fell through at the last minute in the previous window was that he was there was an offer came in from another club. He'd already gone and spoken to one club and was just about to agree terms, and then heard that a Spanish club had become interested, and so he decided he didn't want that club. He was going to go and wait for this other one to come through. So maybe the clubs are a little bit wary of
Yeah.
approaching him at this stage. That they're not sure whether he is truly going to commit if they and they might just they're possibly just chasing other targets who they feel are more true to their word or more reliable.
Do you think if I mean, I guess there's two hypotheticals here. One is that we don't make the playoffs at all. Also, I guess there's three, but we'll go. One is that we don't make the playoffs at all. Do you think there's any chance that we could convince him to stay, or would we want him to stay? And I guess the other one is if we got promoted, would we want him to stay? And I think he'd be much more willing in that scenario. But is there a scenario where we would try to sign him to a new deal, and is there a scenario in which he'd accept?
I I honestly think the only scenario in which he would accept is if we're in a position if we're in the Premier League, and that's sort
Yeah,
of hard to guarantee with 6 months to go, and we're not in an automatic spot. And while there's not that big a gap to the playoffs, there's a big gap. It's a lot of points to overcome to try and sneak into the top two over the second half of the year. You're talking about we'd have to win like
basically all our
like
games, really.
yeah 15 of the last 19 or
Yeah.
whatever games are like it's probably that's probably a little bit beyond us. So I think like would I want him to stay? Do I want him to stay? Absolutely. I mean, like regardless of what division, I just think it's going to be hard because I think he's one of the players who's on Premier League wages still.
Mm.
So you to
Yeah,
get him to
I
stay,
think he would definitely be probably the top wage earner at the club.
yeah. And so
Um,
you'd be asking him to to sign a new
yeah,
contract at this stage and stay at the club in the championship. You're asking him to take a very large pay cut, which while I'd be happy to take a bloody tenth of what he's earning at the stay at but um, he's got to do what's right for him. They've only got a short career, so uh, the way it's gone, I wouldn't begrudge him for
it's
running his contract out and
yeah,
signing on somewhere else. But I'd be immensely happy if the club could find a way to negotiate a deal with him.
it's an interesting one because I think there's two elements to his ambition, which is yes, he does seem to very much want to move. He's sort of agitated for a move quite regularly before now, where he's almost been looking for a big money move, so to speak. But I think also he's just looking to play at as high a level as possible. Um, but I guess the other interesting element is that this is almost, I mean, without going too far back into his playing history, I'd say this is almost the best form of his career at this sort of level, anyway. I know when he was in France, he played reasonably well, but he also came off the bench quite often, and then obviously was decent for us in the Premier League, but wasn't scoring a whole lot of goals. This would almost be the best form of his career, and I wonder if there's an element. Yes, he's getting to that age where he does have to think about what's best for his career in terms of making the most of it while he can. I just sort of wonder if there's any element that he's been at the club for this is his third year now, whether he's got any sort of attachment and might sort of if we said look we can give you a 1 year deal at yes it's a reduced wage but we'll have like a buyout clause and if things aren't going well you could leave in January. I just wonder if he'd put another year in to sort of say look let's see how we go. If we just missed the playoffs, let's see how we go. Reloading and going again next season with sort of a fresh start, where we could genuinely have a tilt at it. It's an interesting one. I kind of tend to agree. I think he'll probably leave, but you never say never. The only thing that makes me think he will leave is the Allams seem quite desperate and one-eyed when it comes to getting these Premier League wages off the books, which is also why I think Marshall will probably leave, which seems crazy, really, when you think we'll have a third starting number one keeper in 3 seasons, essentially. Probably being long next season, which at least isn't too bad since he's already at the club. But it seems like they're quite quite keen just to get these players off the books, and I think Henriksen's another who's already expressed that he'll probably head back to Norway after this season or next season, I think.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's what you get when our parachute payments are running out and
Yeah.
coming to the end. And like I think overall, like we've probably done pretty well to like we've only got those couple of boys left. It's a shame. I mean, Marshall. I mean, if it was last, like the Marshall that we've seen for most of his contract here, I'd have almost been happy to see him go. But the way he's been performing this season, he's been outstanding, and he's hardly put a foot wrong. Apart from I think there's one or two errors
Yeah,
that
at the
like
start
clear
of the
errors,
season,
but
I
like
think,
he's
but
been
yeah.
like he'll be sorely missed. But in saying that, like you've got Long there, who
He seems a reasonably good keeper, so
I
it's
think,
not a huge concern.
he's what 8 years younger or something.
Yeah,
Long's only
yeah.
20, 24, 25, I think. So he's got plenty of years, potential to be a long-serving keeper and really build his game and develop well. Because we seem to have some pretty good goalkeeping coaches at the club who are doing a lot of good work. So
Which is quite funny when I don't know if you remember back when we were in the Championship after our first spell in the Premier League, we almost seemed to have a different lone keeper every 6 months almost. I mean, we had guys like Galashki and Manoni, and I think there was a few others along the way as well. A couple from United, I think, as well. His name escapes me, but we just seem to be rotating keepers constantly because after Myhill left, we just didn't seem to buy a new keeper for whatever bizarre reason. So it's kind of nice these days that we have, as much as we're still sort of rotating a keeper each year, that they're a permanent keeper at the club, and it's a bit more stable in that sense. But speaking of Marshall, it's probably worth talking about his form, as you've sort of touched on there, and also of Device, is probably the two in the defence who've really sort of come on in leaps and bounds in this sort of period of good form, where we've kept 3 clean sheets in a row now, and it's been 11 goals scored since the last we've conceded. So it's not as if we're sort of sitting back in some sort of defensive formation. We're still attacking and being quite open, but the defence is just being remarkably resilient.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Particularly, I think Device's like growth through the season. Like the first probably couple of months, we were watching and going, oh, we young guy. You can see the potential there to be good, but he's just making these errors all the time. And then I think just that, I guess like the stewardship of having Elphick alongside him, a senior figure, a mentor, for that time to just be able to say, oh, this in these situations, work on these things, or read the game a little bit this way or whatever. It's been invaluable for him, and he is almost a different player for the last just the last 6-7 weeks. Just been outstandanding, really.
And I guess the player to talk about in front of them, who you've already touched on, is Stewart, who another one has just sort of had this remarkable turnaround in form where if you'd said in the winter window, I guess the summer window in England, if a club had made an offer for him, you'd almost drive him to that club. But now he's sort of turned into this player where people sort of he's constantly going to get weighed down by the fact that he was involved in that Andy Robertson deal, and I sort of try and sort of rationalise it by thinking, well, we got Kevin Stewart for it for I think roughly $5 million, but we also got Wilson in January, who I like to think we kind of got because of some goodwill with Liverpool. So I sort of think, Kevin Stewart and Harry Wilson sort of Wilson's helping us stay up last season. Yeah, okay, that's not as unreasonable as it could otherwise feel. But he'll always be weighed down by that, I think. And at least now he's starting to show it on the pitch, and people are sort of starting to put that comparison out of mind. And he's just a man transformed. He started the last 4 games, I think, and he got man of the match against Sheffield Wednesday as well. And I think that's probably the key for him. Is last season, I can't remember if it was actually his debut game. It was one of his first few for the club. He had that really bad ankle injury. I think it might have actually been his debut against QPR, and he came off after 25 minutes or something with that bad injury and was out for quite a while. and so he just didn't get that sort of good start at the club and didn't get that sort of run of confidence, and so he's sort of been in and out of the side. And then when you start getting that pressure from the fans, from the media, it can get really tough. And it's the same with Marshall, really. So the fact that they've been able to turn it around and become such quality players is a real testament to them. And we have to put our hands up, or I'll put my hand up and say I was entirely wrong about both of them. That we were quite critical of both players and thought that they just needed a fresh start somewhere else, and they've turned it around at Hull, which is great to see.
Yeah, I think what I said to you off air was, this is the Stewart that we paid the £4 million for, or whatever it was that we paid. He's actually just bossing that midfield area, and it's chaos at my house at the minute. Dogs everywhere. Yeah, it's been great to see, and I think you mentioned it before, like the fact that for the first 2 months or 3 months the season we were saying, oh, well, isn't it good that Batty is young Hull Academy player and is got himself into a starting position, is performing so well each week, and I can't really see anyone pushing him out, and I think that's testament to how hard Stewart has worked and how far he has come to get into a position where not only has he managed to push Batty out of the starting 11, he's pushed him he's cemented himself so well in the last 4 games. He doesn't look like I can't imagine a situation where he's going to get dropped bar like an injury.
Yeah, definitely. So it's fantastic to see for him, and really, I mean, the other players we haven't mentioned, whether it's Kane, whether it's Evandro, whether it's Martin or Stewart or Campbell or whoever's up front for us, whether it's Kingsley at left back's also vastly improved. Burke is looking really solid. Henriksen in midfield's great as well. So the whole team has done fantastically well over the last couple of weeks or last couple of months even if we haven't talked about them in detail. But we will look ahead now to the Aston Villa game this Saturday, and we were saying before we started recording that it's crazy to think that last episode that we recorded, we were hoping for a point against Birmingham, and now we're sort of looking at the Villa game as if we drop points in this, it'd be a disappointment. And in fact, we're above them in the table, which is just utterly ridiculous when you think after that first game of the season against them that the two sides just looked miles apart in terms of form, in terms of quality, in terms of where they're going to finish the season. And it's a chance to put a real gap between us and them, and to close the gap to the top 6, given that a couple of the sides just above us in the table play each other.
Yeah, I think if we win and there's a couple of draws or the results go the right way, we could end up only a point outside the top 6, I think, if my memory serves me.
Crazy, yeah.
Which is insane considering, as you're saying, before when we last recorded, we were 23rd or whatever, and crazy times. But I think we're at a point now where, what do you say? We just have to keep doing what we're doing. Keep doing what we're doing, and I really can't see any reason why we won't win. It's kind of as simple as that at this stage, I think.
And that's how it felt against Sheffield Wednesday. It just felt like we just went out and did our thing, and there was no sort of concern that, it wasn't like they had a whole barrage of chances at the start of the game and we felt shocked or anything. We just went out calmly and just did what we did. Yeah,
well, the only thing I thought was funny was Kieran Westwood. He was pretty much the difference. He was the difference in that game that stopped it from becoming another 6-0. And I remember a certain playoff match against Sheffield Wednesday where there was a Kieran Westwood who did the same, pulled off save after save after save. So I don't know why he just wants to pull it out against us, but no, it was good, and I think I really don't. I can't see a loss this weekend. It's just that's just how I see it. Everyone's performing so well, and it would. I think obviously the run is going to come to an end eventually, but I don't think it'll be this weekend.
Well, it's crazy because somebody posted up our remaining fixtures for the season, and it's great when you consider the fact that we've already played Leeds twice, who are probably the most dangerous side in the league, especially if your training ground is easily accessible by certain Leeds employees, it seems. But having already played Leeds, we've obviously still got Norwich and West Brom to come as probably the two other most dangerous teams in the competition. But other than that, when you think about it, everyone just seems eminently beatable. Derby perhaps always seem to trouble us. They're probably the other big question mark over whether we can get a victory. But there's a whole lot of games coming up where you think if we can produce the sort of form that we're producing now, which, as you say, there's not a whole lot of reason why we can't, because it's not like we're kind of fluking 1-0 wins or anything like that. It's quite comprehensive victories. If we can sort of keep it up, and yeah, we're going to drop a few games here and there, but suddenly that 40-point target that Adkin set, which is now 37, it doesn't seem that remarkable to accomplish. And I think it was Buckingham after the Wednesday game pointed out we're actually a point better off than we were in 2007, 2008 when we got to I think we finished third that season on our way
Yeah.
to promotion. So
Yeah, I saw that they've been doing a lot of comparisons between the two sides lately. It's been interesting reading.
yeah, so it's one of those ones where you think you kind of you look at it. I think before the Wednesday game, I sort of looked at promotion or playoff possibilities and thought, well, so much has got to go our way. We've got to win so many games to get there. But when you get it phrased that way or framed that way, that we're actually a point better off than a team that did make the playoffs and did actually finish third and then won the playoff final. You look at Fulham last season as well, for instance. I mean, they were 12th halfway through the season, and then I think they dropped one or two games for the second half of the season, and just the momentum carried them through. And that's almost the benefit as well of where we're coming from, is as much as you can consider, well, it's unsustainable to just keep winning, who's to say that we can't? And if we do, you actually have that winning momentum. You're not sort of stumbling over the finish line into the playoffs. You've actually got that confidence that you're playing against sides that you've already beaten, and there's nothing to say that you can't keep going.
Yeah, I think like the other one thing to consider, like I'm just looking at Grisiki's stats, and you're talking about he's got 3 goals, he's got 4 assists, which are good, but I think about all the ones that he hasn't. But
Yeah.
he's so confident at the moment, and he's taking players on. He's having plenty of opportunities, and
He is
he's had
such a good player.
so many close calls. He's hit the post a bunch of times in the
Yeah,
last month, and like all sorts of things. Like
he's such a good player to watch at full flight. When he's got his tail up and he's running at defenders, and you see him doing like nutmegs against Leeds players, and yeah, as you say, just taking shots and just worrying keepers. He is such a fantastic. He's probably the most skillful, most dangerous player in the division on his day.
yeah, and I think like that's the thing. You think about how good he is, and yet like his stats, while they're good, they're not outstanding, and yet he's probably, despite Bowen being the form player of the competition, Grisiki's the one that everyone fears, and I
Yeah,
think that's going to be as long as he keeps doing what he's doing, and I think he's got himself into a position. He was sort of a little bit up and down through the first part of the season, but he's got himself into a point now where every week he's just on. He's ready to go, and he's doing what he loves. So I think it's gonna
yeah.
be
I think that's a great point. That it's sort of what I was saying about. It's not like we're stumbling over teams and winning 1-0 through a lucky goal or anything like that. We're kind of comprehensively dismantling sides and yet could be winning by more. I mean, even against Bolton, we could have scored more goals. It was that first half where for the first half an hour or so, we were just kind of peppering their goal but not breaking through. So there's been all of these opportunities to actually just put on an absolute cricket score against some sides. So if anything, we're sort of being held back rather than just sort of stumbling across the line. Just on the Villa game, so they lost last time out to Wigan 3-0, which is a pretty remarkable result in itself. Obviously, Abraham staying at the club is great news for them, or he's at least for the time being staying at the club. Other big player, obviously, being Elphick, who will likely line up in defence for them. But for all the talk of our defensive stability, I mean, Villa have leaked 5 goals in their last 2 games with Elphick at centre back.
Yeah, I think the other thing about Villa is they
6 goals, in fact.
they kind of adjusted club, and they're just a little bit in turmoil at the moment. They couldn't quite get it together under Bruce, and so he left, and Dean Smith came in, and they got a couple of good results. But overall, they really haven't improved on what they were dishing out for Bruce. So, I sort of thought when Smith came in and they started getting a couple of results together, I thought, oh, we'll have that new manager feeling, and they'll continue their climb up, and they'll be at the top in that top end of the table, but they really haven't, and so they're not really a team that holds a lot of fear for me.
No, and I think especially back-to-back 3-0 losses for them against Swansea and Wigan. I guess that was in the FA Cup, so it's not necessarily as poor. I mean, they had a 2-2 draw with QPR before that, so that might be what I was thinking of in terms of the 5 goals. But there'd be a lot of pressure from the fans now and a lot of impatience because they're a big club. They should be looking at a club like Newcastle, who when they went down, or West Ham even, bounced straight back up. Didn't happen for them last season, lost in the playoff final. They'll be feeling quite a lot of impatience and expecting it just to sort of click into gear for them because they've spent a lot of money. You'd think, I mean, they're like Derby in that sense, where Derby every couple of years goes out and spends this whole heap of money and their supporters get very expectant that they're just going to go up. Same with Leeds. And it just doesn't happen for them. And that leads to this pressure on managers that you don't necessarily see at other clubs. Same with Forest to an extent. You saw Karanka leave them quite recently, where there's this pressure of expectation because of the history of the club, because of the size, that when results don't sort of just kind of come naturally and they don't kind of flow up the table to an automatic promotion spot, there's a lot of pressure at the club. And I think you're right that it's sort of, whilst they're not sort of in crisis, they're definitely a club that another couple of bad results, another, sort of drop down the table and things could get quite bad quite quickly for them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that it's not us this time.
Well, it's just a weird feeling to go into games. That Wednesday game, watching that last week, sitting down to watch it was the weirdest feeling to think that we were actually going into a game as favourites and a game that we were expected to, and same with the Bolton game before that, where we actually felt like we were going to win quite comfortably. And of course, nothing's ever comfortable supporting City. You never win the games that you expect, but somehow we are at the moment, and it's fun. I mean, I think I sent out a tweet quite recently that it's if we don't get promotion, that's fine by me. It's just great that this half of the season, or at least at the moment, is fun again. It's sort of that joy of football again. It's why we love the game, why we support the club, that you get that sort of passion back. And I think at the start of the season, as much as I was still watching the games and supporting the club, there was sort of that detachment there because you went into games expecting to lose or expecting disappointment, and it was a lot harder to get sort of emotionally invested in and excited about games in the same way. Whereas now it's that great feeling again. It's our best run of form since we went up under Bruce 3 years ago now. So it's great to be watching winning football and the club at the top of its game.
Yeah, I just remembered something I read the other day, which was I think this is the first time that City has won 6 in a row since like 1914 or something.
Yeah, it's the first time. So it's the stats since 1910. It's our longest winning streak at this level since 1910. So I think we'd won 6 in a row. Maybe 15 years ago in like League One. Yeah. But remarkable, like at this level, for it to be that long since we've been in this form. When I would say the majority of our history, we have been a second division club, a championship club. So it's not as if we're a perennial League 2, League 1 club. And, 1910, that's so long ago, but we aren't up here that often. But we actually are. So it is actually quite a remarkable stat that it's been that long since that number of wins. And if we do beat Villa, it'll be interesting to see how long we go before it is our longest winning run. Until we surpass that League One sort of winning run. But on that, I guess, what's your score prediction against Aston Villa?
I think, I don't know. I got a weird feeling that Elphick's gonna like pop up and score another goal like he did in the first game when we played him in round 1. I just have this thing he'll just like pop up in the 5 minutes to go but I think it'll be reasonably comfortable. I think I'll go 3-1.
Yeah, I am a little bit conscious of that. There is always that element of a player scoring against his former club, so I'm quite worried he will do that. I could see a 2-1 or a 2-0. I just think we look so solid in defence that it'll take something to knock us off. and it's 8 wins. It was 8 wins in a row in 2004, 2005. So that's sort of the target this group has to defeat. And then we'll see what the next longest winning run is. But I would see like a 2-0 or a 2-1, a 2-0 or a 2-1 win for City, I would think. So yes, thank you for joining me, Dan. It's been quite a while between drinks, and it's good to get back on the mic.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for listening in. I promise we won't be away for quite so long before our next episode. We should be back this time next week to dissect that Aston Villa result and look ahead, hopefully, to continuing our winning run. But until then, come on, City!
You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
There's no turning back 'cause you're out.